A frenetic family fracas is found in A Banquet, directed by Ruth Paxton in her feature film debut, written by Justin Bohl, who wrote 2015's Merge and the upcoming Little Rituals, and stars Sienna Gilroy as Holly, a recently widowed mother who's trying to raise her two daughters. Her husband met an untimely end, and she's just trying to pick up the pieces. Pick up the pieces, as Average White Band once said. And she has her daughters Isabel and Betsy, and since they live somewhere in the UK, it's not exactly specified where, they're just trying to make ends meet. They're trying to do some good stuff. She does have her mother, Granny, as she's called, played by Lindsay Duncan in a pretty terrific role, I might add. And her two daughters, Isabel, played by Ruby Stokes, and Jessica Alexander plays Betsy. I had to write those names down because, well, let's be perfectly honest, sometimes, even with a small cast, you want to get the names right. And I will say right now, as far as this movie goes, it's not going to be for everybody because it is very much a slow burn movie where there's something that starts the second act. It's like, okay, now we're kind of kicking into high gear, and they kind of just build and build, and they build a lot of suspense. They build a whole bunch of suspense. It's very nice suspense. You can stop building right now. No, I don't think you need another loft apartment above it. But it sounds like I'm being critical. I may surprise you here because this actually turns out to be one of the better independent horror movies that I've seen in quite a while. And it's almost a psychological drama, but it's got horror elements because as things go on, you're kind of wondering where exactly is the story going? Are we going to see something truly horrifying? Are we just going to see the horrifying, aspects of the human spirit? Are we going to see how people deal with loss? Some handle it well. Some just pretend that it's, that we can just push it to the side and just keep pushing forward and they can keep doing the routine the way they did and they can stay strong. And a lot of people don't handle that kind of grief very well. And that's another thing that this movie actually does pretty damn well. And Ruth Paxton, for her first time directing a feature film debut, she's directed some short movies before this, really does capture how much the human spirit can be tested when that kind of loss happens. So since she did obviously lose her husband, and we do see that in the early goings, and the daughters are obviously affected, Betsy seems like she's the more driven. She's trying to figure out what she wants to do, go to university, study abroad, whatever. And she seems unsure of exactly what she wants to do. She doesn't want to leave her family, but she does want to do something with her life. And then there's Isabel, or Izzy for short, who does ice skating and is a little bit younger, but, she's in like year 11. I'm not exactly totally sure on the schooling, grades in the UK, but I would imagine year 11, pretty self-explanatory. You're almost ready to go to college, or university, as it were. And it seems like, for all intents and purposes, despite the fact that, they're suffering the recent loss of their dad, they're doing pretty well. And then Betsy goes to a party one day, or one night, with her boyfriend Dominic, Kari Zajaz. I'm pretty certain I mispronounced that. I do apologize. And a certain thing happens where she ends up traveling out into the woods after basically a prank is kind of played on her where it's like maybe they're drugs, maybe they're not drugs. She travels out in the woods, she comes back, and things are totally different. She's suddenly not eating. Her mother's very, very worried. And at first it's like, okay, she's just traumatized by, whatever happened. She's just sick. It's a virus. No, it turns out to maybe be something that could either be a possible possession. It could be something psychological. Maybe her daughter is just totally fucked up in the head. Maybe it's genetic. Who the hell knows? As things get, a little bit deeper and we peel back the layers on this story, you find out that there's something kind of fucked up going on. And you're not sure if it's all in somebody's head or if it is a ghost, what exactly it is. It could be a few different things, and it's kind of kept ambiguous. And it's kind of the nice thing about it. They eventually reveal, they peel back enough layers where they reveal what it is. But then there's just enough, stuff that they keep throwing at you to where you stay interested and you really get to dive into these characters. I will say terrific performances by Sienna Gilroy and Jessica Alexander and Ruby Stokes. They're the three main leads here. Lindsay Duncan actually does a very good job as the grandmother and does lend some good backstory, exposition. It doesn't really hammer you in the head with exposition. It kind of gives you a chance to figure out more of this stuff, for the characters for yourself. And that's kind of the nice thing about it. So I will definitely say for a feature film debut, Ruth Paxton does knock it out of the park. And Justin does a very good job writing this. I have not seen 2015's Merge, but it was the only recent writing credit that he had. Little Rituals, I did read up on the description. I'm like, okay, that sounds interesting. Whenever that's out, I'll definitely watch that. So look for a review of that whenever it comes out. Could be later this year. Could be sometime in 2023. Who knows? Could be delayed for a while. Hopefully not. Sounds pretty interesting. Let's get back to this. I'm going to get into spoilers here in a little bit, but Holly isn't handling this well, and no mother would be able to, because a mother's love and patience and just human spirit will get tested seeing their child end up like this, and there's no explanation. Betsy is feeling weird, she won't eat, and there's no explanation. Doctors can't find out what's going on, and there's no clear answers. Answers become a little bit clearer later, but it takes a while to get there. Some people aren't going to like this. And I could totally understand. If you think this movie's boring, if you just think that this movie doesn't have any interesting characters, I will totally understand, because this isn't going to be for everybody. I'm not going to say the movie's perfect. I have some issues. I think there's a bit of pacing, a bit of a pacing problem, and I think sometimes the movie has a couple like different ideas it wants to go with, and I think the indie, the smaller budget prevents them from being able to expand fully on those. But as far as cinematography, it's very beautifully shot. The music is actually quite good, and it does just enough spooky shit that you think, okay, we could delve into full-on horror, and it actually does get... there are a few kind of, gross moments, but not gross necessarily in the case of blood, just gross in the sense like, wow, ugh, okay, and you hear some of this stuff going on. You see, people dealing with various medical issues, and also it's a bit of a social commentary on mental health and how you would handle that if suddenly, somebody very close to you experienced stuff that they just couldn't explain. Would you stay with them? Would you do everything you could to help them? Would you seek out help trying to save your loved ones? Or would you maybe go more in on yourself, focus on yourself and try to make sure that you took care of them because mother knows best? There's a few different directions this movie can go. It does remind me a bit of Saint Maud not quite as good, and that's not knocking this movie, but a Saint Maud because it was A24, and I hold A24 way up high as my favorite studio, along with Neon Studios. It's like A24 and Neon, but IFC Midnight Films does a pretty good job here, and they've crafted a good movie here. Ruth Paxton's crafted a good movie. There's good performances here. I would argue that actually Sienna deserves at least some kind of film nomination consideration, because she does a really good job as a mother that's just totally conflicted, trying to do everything she can to keep her family in check. And the two young actresses, Jessica and Ruby, do a pretty good job. I'm interested to see where they will go in the future, because movies like this can help get, the right eyeballs on you. And it's like, oh, hey, they can do these kind of dramatic parts. And again, Lindsay Duncan does pretty good. And the guy who plays Dominic isn't bad, and then after that, nobody else really has a deep role. In fact, Dominic is like one of the guys that is there for a little bit, and then he's totally gone. So it just focuses on the family, and the family dynamic actually carries this movie, and that kind of stuff can make or break a movie. And it doesn't break a movie here. It actually, lends a whole lot to it, and ends up turning out to be one of the finest movies that I've seen this year, and something that people should absolutely watch. Now, it's like $6.99 on Amazon right now, and it was worth paying for, because I paid $20 over the past number of years, especially since the pandemic hit, for movies that were supposed to be first-run movies. And I was like, okay, I'll just watch these. And it wasn't necessarily a waste of money, but it's like, oh, wow, I paid $20 just to review it, and I ended up hating it. I ended up loving this, and this is something that I think more people should see. Hopefully Ruth Paxton gets to do more movies in the future, and Justin, hey, he's shown that he can do some good writing. So I'm going to get into spoilers here in just a second, but I would absolutely recommend you guys check this out. So I am going to start doing spoilers in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, spoilers. Okay, so Betsy ends up going off in the woods and seeing something weird and whatever, what the hell's going on. She ends up seeing this red moon. Why is there a red moon? Who knows? She sniffed this stuff that was supposed to be cocaine. It was actually powdered alcohol. But then she goes off in the woods and something weird happens. She suddenly will not eat. Holly's worried. We don't know what the hell's going on. And eventually she keeps talking about how, she finally confesses something. She confesses to Dominic because, Dominic's her boyfriend. She confesses to him, and he ends up leaving the house, wondering what the hell is going on. Like, why the hell would he leave? What is going on here? Like, Holly's even looking at psychiatric options and trying to figure out what she can do for her daughter. Well, it turns out Dominic, got a little bit spooked by whatever she said. Granny arrives and talks to her because Betsy's not eating, and Bets, as they call her, she's not eating. She's also not losing weight. So that's a bit weird. Granny says, you were a really good performer when you were a kid, but you rehearsed this whole thing to, pretend like you were haunted by something or something was under your bed. Grandfather bought it. I didn't because I knew you were just acting out. And that's what Granny thinks this is. Well, Granny, you might have been right back then, but you weren't right here. So it turns out that basically Betsy has seen the end of the world as she knows it. She's seen the end of the world as she knows it. And she does not feel fine, because nobody would be fine knowing that. She sees the stars, and she sees all this stuff, and all this fucked up shit is going on, and it's a bit weird, but she's seen all this, and she's seen the end, and she knows how some people will ascend and stuff like that. So it's a bit religious, and it's a bit odd, and Holly's thrown off by this. We don't know why this is happening. We don't know why Betsy suddenly sees this. She sees her having a different purpose, a proper purpose here. And she then basically is talking to her mother, taking her to the woods after visiting a psychiatric joint, and says, I saw all this stuff here and all this happened and everything, and if you don't support me, I'll leave, and if you don't, I'll end my life. And her mother slaps her. And then she says, oh, don't worry, I feel this or whatever, it's going to end up being fine. We go 6 months later, and, well, Betsy's in, kind of a dormant state, a medically induced coma, so to speak. Holly's been basically paying out of pocket and taking care of her, and a doctor hasn't been over for a while because Betsy keeps scaring them. Isabel's not doing all that well either. She's kind of getting worn down because this behavior is wearing down anybody. Granny is trying to convince Holly, basically, she needs help. It's not that you aren't a good mother. She needs help. And there's some stuff that she talks about, like, she talks to Holly about when they were in Osaka, when she was doing some teaching, when Granny was doing some teaching. She says, talked about Japanese folklores, like a ghost story. The Futakuchi Anna. I'm pretty certain I mispronounced that. I do apologize. But basically, there was this farmer that had this beautiful young woman. She was obedient and everything, and just everything a guy could want in a wife, nice and proper and everything, but she wouldn't eat. And then his resources kept getting depleted, almost like he was feeding two people. Well, it turned out what was happening is there was this weird mouth creature thing on the back of her skull that was feasting. It was eating all that stuff. And that may be what's going on here. She's like, well, you believe Betsy's possessed? No, I believe that Betsy's possessed the family, and you most of all. Basically, whatever this is that Betsy's going through is consuming the family, and Granny's trying to get Holly to relent, let her help her. And again, it could be a mental health thing. It may not be. Who knows? It could be a cry for attention. But at this point, it's less a cry for attention and something deeply psychologically damaging. Or is it? So, Betsy talks, while grandmother's there and everything, talk about seeing the end. I see the stars and you've got to believe me in this. And she keeps switching back and forth between being all crazy and then being normal briefly, but she's wasting away despite not losing any weight. And even says at one point, Dad says he's sorry, because in the very beginning, what happened is we see Holly taking care of her husband who was choking, dying. We have no idea what happened to him. No idea. He just died all of a sudden. He drank like some chemicals while she was making a smoothie, and she's trying to revive him and everything. What did you do? What did you do? Because we see him choking, taking some pills, and we have no idea. And it's similar to what's going on with Betsy. Very briefly, but similar. Is it possible that he saw whatever this whole thing was, this blood red moon and everything? And Betsy saw this whole thing. So naturally we could think that maybe it's just hereditary. Maybe she saw the same thing her dad saw. Maybe she's just gone completely insane. She's had a psychotic break. Again, there are certain things that this movie basically just leaves up to the imagination. And well, as things unravel more and more and more, Isabel decides she's going to leave and go with the grandmother. She decides she's going to go there because she is at a party and she'll cry if she wants to. She'll cry if she wants to. She'll cry if she wants to. You would cry too if this happened to you. Da, 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 da. So I don't know who these people were at the party, but Dominic ends up just showing up out of nowhere, taking Isabel back. She was throwing up because she was sick from the party. And then a bunch of weird shit happens because we find out Dominic tells the mother, because the mother asks, what did Betsy say to you? Oh, that she saw, the end and everything, and that talking about stars, and that you're the star, and you're the biggest star, the first star, and she has to prepare you. Prepare me? How does she need to prepare me, you may wonder? So he has a cross on his neck. She has a praying works. Will this work? This is where I think the movie starts to throw a whole bunch of stuff at the screen, because then it realizes, okay, we built enough suspense. Crap, we need to have some stuff happen. I'm not knocking the movie. It just, again, has some pacing issues. But, well, Isabel ends up going and staying with the grandmother. So, okay, that's fine. It makes sense. She says, well, she did make me feel what it's like to feel like I'm nothing. Because she's like, oh, Betsy was always your special girl. Granny apologizes to Holly, tells her she's a good mother. And then that night, well, we see a bunch of weird bullshit going on. We have no idea what's happening. Like, what is going on here? Like, this is really, really weird. So, very, very strange shit going on here. At one point, before this, we see this disgusting part where Betsy is around a whole bunch of rotted food and everything, and Holly's having a dream. This is all a dream because, there's this mouth at the back of her head. And that would have actually been kind of interesting if they had done that. Not that what they came up with wasn't interesting, but oh my God, it was so weird. She was digging through the food, the rotted food, the messy food and stuff like that, and feeding this weird creature on the back of the head. It could have gone literally that direction. But what ends up happening is there's like this psychotic break seemingly between Holly and Betsy, where Betsy talks to her and tells her, hey, you're my mother. I need you. This is the whole deal. Your love will help carry me, and we will go to this brand new world, a whole new world. And then they have this like screaming fit because Betsy is seemingly losing it. And Holly's there with her. She's there with her. She's there with her. She's making sure she's all right. The next morning, she's making sure she's all right. And then Betsy suddenly dies. Okay, she's either ascended or something, because there's this stuff sparkling around her. It's like the stars or dust. It's really hard to tell. Could it be stardust? Hopefully not. That creature or that gimmick was shit. But then Holly's upset. She just starts to leave. She leaves, wandering around, and she breaks down, starts wailing, and suddenly this weird light washes over her, and it's almost like she's burning up in all these stars. And then suddenly there's this explosion, and then it ends. See, again, it's like they just threw stuff right at the end or whatever. They're like, okay, it really was true what was going on. We could have done all this other stuff, but we went here. So again, a few pacing issues, definitely not a deal breaker, because I did really quite like and love this movie. But is it perfect? No, but it is definitely a home run for a feature film. And I'm going to give it an A. I'm going to say Ruth Paxton definitely nailed it. Justin Boll definitely nailed the writing, and the three really good performances from the main family members. So A for sure. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Like, share, subscribe, Twitter handle in the description. I'm John Ritlin. I'll see you soon.